or another applicable to what we might decide to do in Alberta on a go-forward basis. What was really interesting in looking at those presentations, and I didn't go there, but the presentations are all online, so you can go and look at them, is a recognition that we are in this together, we suffer together, we'll respond together, and we can only plan for this by working together. There is no single government agency or any other group that is going to help us accomplish what we might want to have on a go-forward basis unless we're all working together. In water, that's sometimes a really interesting thing to try and do, is to have people actually work together. And I think in this province we have seen some good successes. Now I'll relate one of those in a couple minutes. But I think if we take a look at a group of words, these might guide the choices we make. Collaboration. People have to learn to work together and to actually collaborate. I used to wonder what that meant, and then as I've gotten older, I've remembered some things my mother told me when I was young. One is, Dave, a conversation is not waiting for your turn to talk. Collaboration is as much about listening and understanding as it is anything else. Cooperation. If we can collaborate, then we also have to learn to cooperate. And people with very diverse views on the same thing can actually do this. We can be motivated to do this. Integration. So, whatever the city of Calgary does, as a result of its plans, will definitely have an effect on the city of Calgary, but it'll also have an effect on everybody downstream. So, integration, taking a look at this as a systems problem, taking a look at the entire Bow River Basin and its tributaries becomes very important. The one piece that is really difficult in all of this, because it usually gets into money, is implementation. So when we've got the collaboration and the cooperation, we're moving to the integration, we have to implement. And that implementation is sometimes what we do not get to. And the reason we don't get to it, many cases, is because it stops raining. Or in the case of a drought, it starts raining. So the implementation piece becomes very important. If we manage to bring these things together in an open and transparent way, we'll kick off another word that's going to be important going forward, and that's innovation. And that's not just new widgets. That's new ways of doing things and behaving that achieve very specific outcomes. While we're talking about a flood today, over the last 2 or 3 years, there's been a group of very dedicated individuals talking about drought. And that's been happening in the Bow River Basin. It was a project funded by Alberta Innovates Energy and Environment Solutions, which is one of the province's Innovates corporations. And it was taking a look at, is it actually possible to manage the entire Bow as a single unit, as a single system? And that work's been carried out by Alberta Innovates, as well as a Calgary-based company, Alberta Water Smart, bringing in some very good talent from the United States, a company called Hydrologics. What we found in that group is that even though people might have been believed to disagree diametrically with each other, when we looked at the entire system, you can make decisions at a system level that better meet people's individual needs while addressing a whole bunch of other public needs. And I think that similar approach is probably where we're going to need to move to as we talk about how we go forward in flood planning for this province, depending on the community that we live in. In June of this year, I happened to be in the Netherlands. I was at the University of Utrecht. And we took a day with some folks from Deltaris and Delft and went and looked at some of their new flood emergency warning systems and their activities. I guess the Netherlands in some respect is kind of like Medicine Hat. It's at the bottom of everything. So anything that happens in water in this province, in the South Saskatchewan Basin, is going to end up in Medicine Hat. It's no different in the Netherlands. They have the same problems that we do, in that they may be subject to floods that they have very little control over, yet they have to manage them. And so they've now developed, through a very open and public process, ways of diverting water out of rivers, across farmland in some cases, in many cases, to prevent that water from ever running into a city. And in other cases, they're building cities that basically flood. I don't think we're in that situation here in the province, but I think there are a multitude of opportunities we have that we can look at. So just to finalize and not run on, recently I've learned some new language. In this conference that took place in Florida, there was an awful lot of talk about nowcasting. Not just forecasting, but nowcasting. And this is really taking a look at how much better information might you need in the midst of an event to make the best decision right now. Having a lot of, I think the other language is situational intelligence. But the nowcasting was taking a look at how much data are you getting about the rain that's falling, but bringing in Doppler radar at the same time on portable units to find out where the intensity pockets are. Because if you just rely on what's happening in the rain gauges, you may not be getting a complete picture. So I think we have an opportunity now in Alberta, based on the experiences we've had, to bring in some of the best technologies and approaches and really see if we can't, as communities, build a very resilient and positive response to the future events that are likely to occur and likely will occur. But we may be able to manage them in a way that's very different than what we've seen in the past, because we may be aware of more options to deal with them. So there are roles for academics and universities. I know at our university, we have folks that are very well engaged in the hydrology. We've actually been doing some work, and also, David, so that you know, one of these projects on the bow has actually taken a look at the changes to stream flow from climate change. And we have ensemble forecasts going forward. We should just share those with the city so you've got those. That kind of information is now much more readily available. We are working with Dr. Dave Sachin at the University of Regina. John Pomeroy, who has been mentioned here today, has done some wonderful work at developing models for ungauged streams. So if you don't have any gauges on those streams in the mountains, that doesn't mean you're not without some information about what could happen. And so I think we do have this opportunity of bringing people together. There's definitely roles for governments, federal government, provincial government, and civic governments like Calgary. The role of the federal government in Canada related to floods is very different than it is in the United States. Even though in the US, the primary response is at the state and civic level, the federal government has a number of programs: FEMA, the National Flood Insurance Program, they have the National Weather Service, they have the US Geological Survey. They have a number of things in their kind of toolkit that we don't have countrywide in the same way, although we have much of the data in Alberta. There's a role for corporations. This is one of the things I think is interesting to look forward to in how we might move forward in Alberta, in that there were a number of very large corporations in downtown Calgary who were really impacted by this flood, whose people could not go to work. I would imagine that costs them money. Recently, in the last number of years, a group of corporate CEOs got together in the Minneapolis and St. Paul area. And they created a group called Itasca. I think it has some local significant name. But what they did is they convened state government, civic government, other business leaders, academics, and others to tackle persistent problems in that Minneapolis-St. Paul area. One of them was not floods, but it had to do with transportation networks. Another one had to do with public school education. I think we're leaving some people very untapped. I think a lot of people in corporations have a lot to offer if they know the way to give and if they know the way to share. So perhaps maybe to sum up, I would like you to remember that kind of language around collaboration, cooperation, integration, implementation, and then the innovation that will come out of that. You will be surprised, and I hope we are all pleasantly surprised, at the kinds of ideas that can be generated from citizens and from people who are given an opportunity to participate in a meaningful process and make their views known. One of the difficulties in that task is defining the outcomes you're trying to achieve. So I don't think we can prevent floods. But what we can do is give ourselves a set of pretty discrete objectives about what we want to have happen to public property, to public safety, to a lot of these infrastructure pieces, and then build ourselves going forward with a better idea of maybe how we're going to get there. I doubt that this is cheap, but my expectation is it's less than paying for the damages on that recurrent basis, no matter how quickly or how infrequently or frequently they come about. And I think from a provincial perspective, we're in very good shape in this province. I know at our university, I know a number of people at the U of C and the U of A as well, to bring to bear a lot of very good talent to address these issues, and to also make sure that we're training that next cadre of people we will need in this province to ensure we can continue to make progress as time goes on. Thank you very much. And I don't know if I need to take a whole lot of questions before we get to the open QA, but I'm happy to do so.
I'd like to throw in one very quick one. There's a vast amount of studying going on. How much interchange of information is it going to be? Or is everybody going to be playing poker?
So the question is, with a lot of the work going on, how much interchange of information is there, or are we just keeping it all close to our chests? I think this is one of the interesting opportunities that's in front of us. If you are in the water community, whatever you want to define that as, you'll find that information is exchanged fairly freely. There's a lot of that going on. Researchers who are looking to their publications may be wanting to keep certain aspects of what they're doing somewhat private until they're published. But the interesting thing that I'm seeing is the reason I joined the University of Lethbridge a year ago is because they came to me and they said, we have all kinds of good stuff happening on our campus that we are afraid nobody knows about. That's actually my job. To take the good research outcomes that are happening at the University of Lethbridge and make sure they have traction in community, in government, and in business. I think that's going to happen more and more as we go ahead. But we can encourage the open collaboration between researchers, and it's actually happening. I think it's happened a lot more often in this province in the last few years than people give it credit. And I know from when I used to be at Alberta Innovates and run the water research program for them, everything we did was both multidisciplinary as well as in many cases multi-institutional. Please.
Thank you. I'm going to position a question